Okay, so this is not the video I was planning on making today, but there has been something that has been weighing on my mind, and I feel like if I don't talk about it, it's just gonna sit there, and I don't want to do that to myself. I want to get my thoughts out and talk about it because there has been something going on that I don't really think my part of the internet would know about, but it very much connects into other subjects I've been speaking on, and I think it's a really clear-cut example, not really like teachable moment necessarily, but is something that I think is representative or like worth thinking about in like a larger context, if that makes sense. And before I get any farther into it than that, I will say content warning, trigger warning for like everything. If you are somebody that has experienced or been around intimate partner violence, this is probably not going to be the video for you. It's not going to be a fun time. This is very much going to be a serious conversation. So if you don't have headspace for that right now, if you don't have mental, stamina for that, no worries. Leave. Do what you gotta do. Fun videos will be linked down below if you want to have something more lighthearted for your day. But this is really important. So without further ado with that, I will just kind of give us a little bit more breathing room before we get into the real meat of what's been happening. But if you're like me, you probably don't really know a whole lot about who this person is. So recently, there was a streamer named Amouranth who exposed her husband as being abusive, more or less. And this really came as a shock because Amouranth is a huge, one of the biggest professional Twitch streamers and OF models. And she is unbelievably successful. Like, she makes 7 figures a month just from what I understand. And she, like, if you don't have any frame of reference, like, her numbers kind of put, like, Belle Delphine to shame. Like, she's a really, really hard worker. She has sort of a reputation amongst other streamers as being a workhorse, as being somebody that is just always grinding, always looking for that next trend, innovating, and is just always nose to the grindstone on that. And, she seems to have a lot of business acumen and just have just a really put together persona. And so that's why this seemed to be really shocking for people. And, to be fair, not everyone is a fan of Amouranth. I'm not really personally involved enough with this to really have much of an opinion, but she has been controversial in the past for, pushing Twitch's hot tub meta and sort of pushing generally at the boundaries of Twitch TOS and kind of getting away with things that people think maybe she should have been banned for, or at least kind of get, some kind of larger repercussion for doing. And then also sort of a more big story about she got kicked out from a gym she was at once. She was streaming there, and then she kind of like jokingly, air quotes, made a comment that it was like because of racism. She's a white girl, by the way, if you guys, that wasn't obvious. It was a very weird situation, but I feel like now, looking back on those things retroactively, kind of this new context that we have reflavors a lot of that and reflavors a lot of sort of what she was doing on Twitch, and that's worth considering. So essentially what had happened, I do have notes here, so I apologize if I look at them. I will say just really quickly for, sort of addressing my own bias. Again, I don't really know anything about Amouranth. The only thing I really know her from is she did a stream with Hassan Piker and Ethan Klein where they were like in a giant pool filled with Ritz crackers together. So that's really the only time I've watched her. If you guys don't have the context for that, it sounds insane, but that's what it was. So what had happened is a couple days ago, Amouranth was streaming Overwatch 2. That is a recent game that came out. I think I heard on the call she was with like Moist Critical, aka Charlie. So she was on Overwatch 2, she's playing that. And then she basically says, oh, like, I can't play another game, I gotta go. My assistant says there's a situation that needs to be handled, so I'm gonna go. But she didn't stop her stream, she just left Overwatch. And she was muted, and she was like kind of in the background, kind of coming in and out. And then after, I don't know, almost 2 hours of this, she unmutes, and there's some guy on the phone screaming at her. She is in tears. And, like, the first thing she says, and this is like, so I wasn't, God damn it, I was not expecting to get emotional, listening to this and recounting this. Because it wasn't, like, I didn't really get that emotional listening to it originally. But I am also very close with my dog. I'll show a picture of her on screen. My dog Bandit is, like, my whole life, as far as I'm concerned. And so I feel like Amouranth is also very attached to animals. She said for a long time that she wants to use her money to start animal sanctuaries. And so I feel like we kind of get each other on that level. And so the first thing that she says is, why do you want to kill my dogs? Which is, like, kind of a crazy thing to say. Just, like, unmuted. Oh my gosh. Okay, what's happening here?
Why did you say you were going to kill dogs?
You're literally doing the thing that you did this morning, which is you're interrupting what I'm explaining to you.
No, tell me. That's not acceptable.
What do you mean, no? I'm telling you right now. You're interrupting me telling you!
Why did you say you were going to kill my dogs?
And so, from what I can tell, having watched the whole VOD, it seemed like they had gotten in an argument about her mishearing something or maybe not paying attention and her still being confused. And just, like, the level of berating that happened was just, like, it was just, like, I have not heard anything like that recorded on a live stream before. Like, it really was shocking to hear that.
No, I tried to tell you
what
I
heard.
heard.
You did not say that? Are you saying you did not say that?
I tried to tell you what I heard from you. And then you called me a liar.
Then you tell me, what did you say?
I don't even know what you're saying anymore.
Bro, here's what happened. I'm going to start from the beginning. I asked you why, if there's a reason, because you insinuated that. Why would we only do threesomes with guys? I think we should do them with guys.
Threesomes.
Oh my god!
I don't want to do.
See this right here is why I said that.
And then they start talking about threesomes, like something about, like, only having threesomes with guys, and her being like, I don't want to have threesomes. No idea where that came from. It was very random. And pressuring your partner into group sex acts is not a good thing to do. So I should say now that the man's voice that we heard was her husband, apparently. And Amouranth has been very dodgy with answering questions about, do I have a husband? What's my relationship status? She has always denied having a partner. And so a lot of people, weirdly, were hearing this and were mad that she had a husband. Because they felt like, oh my god, I've been donating to you. You're not single? What the fuck? And, like, I just can't even, like, I'm so far removed from that mentality. I can't even contemplate being like, I gave you $5. What do you mean you're married? Like, that's not the problem here, my dude. But okay. So they're having this argument, and then he, like, suddenly escalates this because, like, threatening to kill somebody's animals wasn't enough. He then escalates it to saying, like, I'm gonna go on Twitter and I'm gonna say that you're trying to swat me. I'm gonna reveal that I'm your husband. Like, I'm gonna ruin your career, and says that he is going to destroy everything, again, over an argument about her maybe not hearing something fully. And he excuses the fact that he said he was going to kill her dogs because it was like, oh, well, you get too emotional, and I had to prove that, you only respond to things when you're emotionally activated. It's like, I don't think she's the only emotionally activated one in this room, my dude, but okay there, okay. And then she replies that, like, over him screaming that, like, well, he got physical, he tried to take her phones away, and that she did try to call the cops, and he was going to try and pass this, like, cop call as like being swatting, which two very different things, right? One of them is like a false thing you do to get someone in trouble, potentially kill them. A lot of people consider swatting to be essentially attempted murder. And then calling the cops because somebody is physically threatening you is like a very legitimate use of police action. And so it just kept going, and there was like an hour of this. It just keeps getting worse. There's more information that keeps coming out where you realize, oh, this isn't just a one time somebody got really angry, letting off steam. Like you realize, like in this slow, horrible horror movie-esque fashion, that this goes so much deeper because he controls her accounts. He controls her banking. He has all of her social media, and he has the ability and the will to destroy it at an instant, right? He's threatening to destroy her on social media with Twitter. He threatens to throw away all of her money and just burn it. At one point, he talks about how, like, I'm working more than you, and, you know, if we split, I'm only going to give you $1 million, and if you disagree with me, I'm going to burn it all in court, and I'm going to throw away it on Bitcoin. And just, she not only is showing this both in the conversation that was happening then, but then also in text messages where she didn't call him, I think because her phone was off, and he was just like, if you don't call me, I'm gonna give away this money, you know, I'm throwing away your stuff, I'm getting rid of your luggage, I'm throwing away your merch, and like, he was literally throwing away hundreds of thousands of dollars because he didn't get a phone call from her when he decided he needed a phone call. It was really scary stuff to watch and see all of that unfold. And the entitlement this man has over her body and her work is just next level. Like, he has all of the two-factor authentication stuff connected to his phone. He controls everything. And meanwhile, Amouranth is, I don't know all the numbers, but she is, I would say, more likely than not, the hardest working Twitch streamer in terms of number of hours. She has literally streamed 346 out of the last 365 days. She averages 11 hours per day streaming. She does not get a regular day off. She has no breaks. She literally streams, eats, goes to sleep, wakes up, gets ready to stream, and then streams, and that is her life. She works very hard. She has literally streamed 45% of every moment of every day of the last year for years and years in a row. And this man has the gall to say that he's the one who deserves the money. He's the one who's the hard worker. And at one point during all of this, she's crying and saying, you used, or something to this effect, you used my body to build this empire. And there was a moment at TwitchCon, which just happened this last week, and that has a whole other can of worms attached to it. She was at TwitchCon, and when she was going down Artist Alley, she made a comment when at a booth about how, you know, she used to do crafting streams. She got started doing cosplay, but that didn't make the money, and being a whore online was the better business model. And how basically when she retires, she wants to go back to doing that crafting cosplay stuff again. And so you could kind of read between the lines now and see that she was really resentful of this image and this way of doing Twitch that she was made to do by her explosively angry spouse. And I think this is where it gets into kind of, you know, unfair territory for what people have maligned her for years. And again, you know, none of us knew. And this is where it gets, you know, horrifying to think about, is somebody who is literally streaming 11 hours a day. Almost the majority, almost half of her life every day is being streamed. And her own fans, there were rumors that she was married, but they didn't even know that she was married, let alone being financially abused, emotionally abused, physically abused by this other person in her life that no one like really knew for sure existed or not. And so from what it sounds like, from what she said in the stream, is that she wanted people to know that she was married. She did not want to have it be a secret. She thought it would be better for their relationship and still be good content for them to stream together and have that be their way of doing things, and maybe kind of getting a little bit of a different audience from that. And then that, on top of that, they did couples therapy.
We went to therapy in, like, late 2020. And then, like, the therapist even told him that it's a form of, like, psychological abuse, and that I'm basically living in a fancy prison. And then he was changed for a bit, and then the hot tub meta arose, and he was like, oh, this is an opportunity. And then he turned into an asshole again. When I agreed to commit to the grind because it was a good financial opportunity for us. And there went all the therapy progress. Right out the window.
Because he saw big dollar signs in his eyes and wanted her to work more, harder again, and take advantage of this business opportunity. And so she got really into the hot tub meta, and she committed to the grind basically to make him happy because he thought that was, like, the smart thing to do. And so she talks a lot about how she didn't really want to do a lot of the things that she was doing on Twitch, or she wasn't getting to do the things that she would prefer to do instead. And so now it kind of calls into question everything that she's done on Twitch. How much of that was really her idea and her prerogative, and how much was it her spouse essentially pimping her out to an audience? Because she had this persona of being this, you know, kind of coomer baiter is the term that people use, that she was baiting coomers to get their money by being hot girl with big booba on Twitch. And now it really seems like she maybe would have been okay with part of that, but she didn't want that to be her thing. Her only thing that she was like a pair of boobs and dyed red hair. She did not want that to be who she was, seemingly. But her husband thought it was the right business move. And he does this really manipulative thing. And this is, we're getting towards the end of everything that happened, but there's so many thoughts with this. Is, you know, in the text messages especially, and you see this over and over again, is he's putting her in scenarios where she can't win, right? Your phone is dead because you're traveling somewhere and you don't have access to a phone charger, or you're just like, you didn't realize it died, or whatever. A million reasons, right? Reasonable stuff. Her phone's dead. He is texting her walls and walls and walls of text, screaming at her over text message, berating her stream quality, berating her not responding to him, throwing away her money, and then being like, well, I threw away too much money, now you can't get the house you wanted. Oh, I threw away too much money, now I have to do a 24-hour stream. Like, literally trapping her in indentured servitude to make more money because, oops, you know, it's like fucking 17th century shit. Like, this is what you would expect to hear from, like, a robber baron that's like, okay, well, you bought a sack of flour and a mug from the company store, so now you owe us $30, but you only made $25 total last week, so you're now you're $5 more in debt, so you can keep living. Like, it's that kind of stuff where, yes, this person is making a lot of money, but if somebody else is throwing it away and then getting in the way of your goals, you're trapped in their ideas, their business plan for your body in order to be able to do the things that you want to do with your own money that you make for yourself. And it's, to get back to the therapy thing, I want to note this because I said this on Twitter. I admire her for wanting to work things out. I think working things out in relationships is a good idea. Couples therapy, great, love it, good stuff mostly. Individual therapy, great, love it, good stuff mostly. But therapy, couples therapy with abusers does not work. Million reasons why, right? It gives tools to the abuser to better use the language of therapy to abuse their partner more and justify what they're doing. Like, suddenly boundaries and limits get twisted into this way of controlling somebody where it's like, you're not allowed to have freedom because you're violating my boundaries when you do that kind of stuff. The premise of couples therapy is both people wanting to get better and having a non-judgmental, non-blame space, which means abuse can be treated like something that is equally perpetuated by both partners. Couples therapists are not always the greatest at recognizing abuse or knowing how to handle it. They can use the therapist as a tool for kind of trapping the person in the relationship because it's like, oh, well, we're working on it, and, you know, they said we're improving, and, like, it ends up being a tool in this cycle where you keep getting trapped because it's better sometimes, and, well, they're working on it, they promise this, that, and the other, when really you're just still stuck in the same thing, but now it has a cherry on top, and it's been painted a different color. So, you have to be really careful. You know, I can't say, if you're listening to this and you're like, can I go to couples therapy with my partner? Is this safe for me? I cannot answer that for you. I will put some links to some resources down below if you want to troubleshoot that, talk to some people about that. But it is really, really hard. And it is not something where the person is going to get better just from that. They have a lot of individual work that they need to do to even get close to being better. And that is not the space that couples therapy is for. So, just a note on that, I wanted to make sure to talk about. And she, at some point in the stream, walks around the house and shows physical signs of abuse, like, in the household. Now, maybe, I don't know if this would, because it's not bodily stuff, but, like, he kicked down her door when she was trying to call the police, so I don't know what else to call it besides that. Coercive control, maybe. Just fear. Just sheer fear as a weapon. Sure, let's call it that. Why not? He also left a huge dent in her wall from where he had thrown something at it. And he was like, well, I didn't throw it at you. I just threw it near you. And it's like, where have I heard that excuse before? Anyways, it's the thing that she talks about is how even though everything was really bad, even though he was verbally berating her, he was emotionally abusing her, he was financially abusing her, she might not have left if it wasn't for the fact that he threatened her animals. Because, like I very first said at the beginning of this, he threatened to kill her dogs. And he sounded unhinged enough to do it in the phone calls. He threatened to kill her dogs because he wanted to prove a point about her not listening enough. And he also threatened to send one of her horses to a meat packing factory. So he had really bumped up the level of emotional manipulation that he was willing to do to get her to do what he wanted. And that is very scary. And that she was willing to tolerate things if it was just her, but because the animals were now involved, she felt like she had to act because it wasn't just about herself anymore. And basically, to kind of get towards the end of the stream, at some point she goes downstairs. She's on a computer. She is trying to kind of get control back over some of her accounts again, because at this point she's hung up, no longer talking on the phone with her abusive partner, and she's trying to get back control of her accounts. She said during the stream that he might try to cut off her electricity or her internet to kind of keep her from being able to do stuff. Also terrifying and scary from a safety standpoint, nothing else. And then as she's doing this, there's a female voice that kind of comes in from off screen, and it sounds like they're asking Amouranth if she's taken her medication. And she's like, what do you mean? What are you asking? And then it cuts off. Oh my god, so fucking scary. So, like, to just have that immediately cut off, and I'm glad it didn't sound like it was him. But for a good 12, 24 hours there, no one heard from her. No one knew what was going on. No one had contact with her other than, like, secondhand, third-hand information from, like, some assistants who maybe should not have been sharing information. And we didn't know what happened. It just, like, she got disconnected, and that is when everything really started to blow up. She tried to stream the next day, and there was a long waiting screen going on, and there was a text that popped up on screen really quick that basically said, sorry guys, cops are here. And so we were like, oh, was that even her? Could that have been her husband? Like, do we know if she's alive or not? Like, it was really scary for a couple of days of, you know, if he was that angry about her just maybe mishearing something, what the fuck is he going to do if he finds out that she streamed all of this? Or part of the conversation, and showed evidence of what he did in the house. What is he going to do then? So I didn't want to talk about this at first because I was like, I don't want to cover this and have the next thing be her obituary in the news, right? Like, I talk to people about this and they're like, well, it's not going to be that bad. And like, you legitimately do not know. When you have been in this cycle of abuse and it's been going on for years and years and years, you never know what that last straw is. And if he's willing to kick down her door, and somebody did dox, apparently, allegedly, her marriage license, we may know who this guy is. And if it's who the internet thinks he is either a current or former competitive bodybuilder, which means he is an extremely physically able person when it comes to causing somebody physical harm. So that was really scary. But luckily, she was able to stream, I think it was either much later that night or possibly the next day. She was able to stream, and she was able to communicate with people. And to me, it felt very familiar. She seemed a little bit disheveled. She seemed like she was not wearing cleavage on stream. She was covered up. She looked kind of cozy, and it really felt like the calm after the storm. She felt like, I don't know if maybe she had been given some medication, or if it was just like the sheer exhaustion of dealing with that and maybe being up all day and then just being like, all of the emotions have left my body and now all I am is calm because there's nothing left for me to feel. I don't know if it was more of that kind of scenario, but she seemed very calm. She was with her dogs. She was okay physically. She said that, he had gone away. He was somewhere else getting help. She was seeking emotional and legal counsel, that the dogs were safe, everything was safe, and that she felt like she was more or less like turning over a new leaf, and that she was excited for the future. Things were going to be really messy, but she at least was getting to choose her own mess and what that mess would look like. So I was relieved to see that she was okay. What I found weird about this, though, is while she's talking about, moving on and her dating life being fucked and needing to go to therapy for a long time and thinking about what her future plans are for content she wants to make, a lot of people were like, oh my God, she's staying with her husband. How dare she? How can she do that? And this is something that I really want to make sure to emphasize in this scenario, because she also talked about how, I think it was her content manager, like a camera person is what she said, had been kind of acting as a unofficial conduit for information about her on Twitter, and she didn't want that, and she felt violated because of that. And this is something that is very important to understand about, especially victims of abuse that are leaving, have just left, or want to leave an abusive situation, is you have to understand abuse as being something that tears down people's boundaries and walls, and they're basically like not allowed to have boundaries anymore. They are not allowed to really have their own autonomy anymore. And so when you have situations like this, it's really important to kind of be that first step towards like allowing that person to have their own autonomy again, which means you don't get to force a person to do what you think is best for them, like sharing their location on Twitter or talking about if they're okay or not. Like, if you don't have permission from that person to share how they're doing or where they're at, you should not be sharing that information. I'm sorry. Like, the internet can be nosy all they want, but ultimately it comes down to that person's autonomy. And especially when it comes to people that were basically saying, like, how dare she, not leave her husband. She needs to pack up right now and leave and find a new place. Like, she was, to me, what I read in that scenario, and this could be my own bias, is I was reading that she was slowly getting ready to move on. She wanted to know what the next legal steps would be, because they are very financially and business-wise entangled. That's going to be a really long, expensive process. And that, she has horses, very hard to move, although I think they are taken care of on a different property by other people. So, moving pets, moving just in general, especially when your job is streaming, is difficult and stressful. And people demanding that you just move out one day out of nowhere, no planning, no foresight, is like, you don't get to control Amouranth, and neither does her husband. Like, it takes, on average, a victim of abuse 7 times to leave for good. And from what we heard from the VOD, from the stream, is that she had already called the police more than once. She had recorded what he had done more than once. They've had a lot of conversations about separating, about splitting, and that I kind of think she's already been through that push and pull of, like, wanting to leave and coming back and wanting, like, maybe not in a physical way, but like emotionally detaching and reattaching. Whether or not she leaves for good and says, good riddance, bye, we're not going to have any contact at all whatsoever right now or later, that's not on us as the internet. That is not on us as random people who don't know her to tell her what to do. The best thing we can do is be supportive. Give her the space to say, this is what I want now. This is what's good for me now. And support her in getting that and staying there with her, as opposed to trying to be another person taking control over her life and going, well, sweetie, you don't really know what's best for you right now because your brain's fucked up because you've been abused. So, like, we're just going to take care of it for you. Don't do that. Call them in to be a team together, to work on solutions together. Do that. Do not start doing things willy-nilly without their consent. Period. Okay? I don't want that. That is re-traumatizing to a lot of people. That can make the scenario worse. And it can make them feel like they can't trust anyone. And especially, it's something the abuser can use to say, hey, they're actually the ones who are trying to control you. I love you. I'm your husband. I'm your spouse. We deserve to be together. Look at these other people trying to break us up and destroy us. Do not give them that wiggle room, please. So just allow her to be herself and allow her to choose what her next path is. I hope it's that they separate. I hope it's that she chooses to go her own way and she chooses to build a new life, whatever that looks like. I don't know how immediate that's going to be, and Amouranth has to do that on her own timeline. Not on ours, on hers. Okay? So that's just really the long and the short of it. And what was both, like, I feel happy for her, but also very sad, because what she was talking about being excited about doing was, like, the most basic human things that you think somebody who is a multi-millionaire would be able to do easily, right? That she gets to watch TV again. That she's going to be able to play the new Pokemon game. That she is going to be able to wear clothing. That she's going to be able to occasionally cover her breasts on the internet. Because every single thing she did, she had to have her boobs jacked up to high heaven and then have them display for the whole internet to oogle at. And that she was going to get to do things with her pets and see her horses and just like the most basic human shit that a person could want to do. And that she hasn't been, sleeping for more than 3 hours a night. Like, what the fuck? How do you even live? Like, literally, how does your brain function? And this is also, and I'm gonna try to not talk about this too much, but I can't help myself because I have been embedded in the Evan Rachel Wood allegations against Marilyn Manson. To me, there were so many things that came up where I'm like, this, people are like, well, how can, like, sleep deprivation be an abuse tactic? Just sleep when you can, just, like, nap in your car. Like, you know, is it really that bad to not get, you know, sleep every night? Like, yes. Like, I don't know if he consciously did this, but when you are sleep deprived for years, as Amouranth apparently was, as Evan Rachel Wood alleged that she was, I don't know if it was years exactly, but, like, for periods of time, like, when you are sleep deprived continually, you are not good at making choices. You are not good at operating your own life as much as you would be if you had a full 8 hours every night, which means you become dependent on someone else to make choices for you because you are physically too tired to do that. This is an abuse tactic. Whether or not it was because he was selfishly like, I want you to work 12 hours a day to make me money, or if it was because he did it because it also made her more, you know, pliable, I don't know. But that was something that stuck out to me as being similar. And we, you know, people were complaining about, oh, you're airing your dirty laundry, you know, this needs to be handled in private, or insinuating that it was fake or that it was for views, or like, oh, we don't really have both sides of the story, like, anyone can be made to sound crazy after 2 hours of a stream, and like 2 hours of an argument. And like, I feel lucky that you, like, I feel happy for you that you live in a universe where you think that this kind of thing could be faked. I would love it if this was faked. I do not have that level of faith in humanity that people are not like this. The body language experts, they can decipher that all day if they want to, you know, come hell and high water, they can do whatever they want, but it felt very real. It felt very emotional, and all of it leading up to now, she is taking an indefinite break from streaming. And keep in mind as well that, like, if this was all like, ooh, business move, whatever, she's already at the top of her game, right? She is, I think, one of, if not the most popular, financially successful creators on OF. She is one of, if not the most popular streamer on Twitch. That's a woman. She is at the top of her game, at the top of her field. There is nowhere else for her to go. Though according to her abuser, she could always be getting more concurrence. She could always be getting more conversions. So, you know, maybe by that logic, if you want to be like that guy, you could say that there's more for her to go towards. But it wasn't like she was like, how brain rotted do you have to be like, I'm going to fake abuse, coordinate that with my husband, and do it on Twitch for money and views. And then I'm going to, after 2 days of like kind of barely streaming, I'm going to go on an indefinite break. What the fuck kind of business move is that? How does that make any sense? Because if anything, it would hurt her for people to know that she had a husband in this way. Like, that is something that is very damaging for her brand, which is why, I mean, to some people's mind at least, you know, playing it out in the long term, you know, who would have really known how that would have gone. But her fan base was built of people that wanted to see her as a single person that they could date and be with themselves and kind of self-insert fantasy-wise into her content, and that they thought if they just gave her enough money, they would have a chance with her. I don't know when the fuck that's ever happened, but it's a fantasy people have, and people were mad that she had a husband, and that was, like, or they felt like, well, it's bad, but also she scammed people because she lied about having a husband, but, like, she said she wanted it to be open. She said she wanted people to know. It was the husband saying, well, you can't share who I am. That would be bad for the business. Don't do it. You can't, essentially. So, I don't know where people get off being like, I think it's a conspiracy. I don't think it's real. Like, I'm not sure about that. That just doesn't, and like, it seems like no matter what you do, there's always going to be people that say you should have done differently, right? Because it sounds like she has, on more than one occasion, recorded things, called the police, tried to get help, tried therapy. She has handled this in private. And so for people who are like, oh my god, why did she do this in public? It was like, it was the last straw. I don't think she pre-planned this. I don't think it sounded like he threatened her animals and she was like, I don't know what else to do. I'm unmuting. People have to know that this is what he's saying. I'm done. Again, I can see it a little bit if you're like brain rotted, but not if you like live in reality at all. And this is one of the times where, you know, you do get to see it. It is recorded. It's there. If police action is going to be taken, it might be used in that. And it's good for other people to know that this is going on. And I'm glad that she felt brave enough to do that, maybe, because that is very, very scary, confronting, essentially, you know, your abuser in a real way where they could choose to retaliate in a very dire way. So I hope that whatever the next chapter looks like for Amouranth, she gets to do what she wants to do. Not what her husband says, not what her fan base says she must do, but what she wants to do. If that's retiring and never being on the fucking internet again, she could do that. Maybe she should. I don't know. I'm not her. Whatever makes sense. I hope she gets to heal from this. I hope that if you are somebody who is listening to this and you're going through something like this, that you find strength in this and maybe can get some help for yourself. If you know somebody going through this, just know that, you know, I'll put some stuff on screen maybe about like how you can help somebody in a scenario like this, but it is not through removing their autonomy. And I just feel like this makes everything so real. I just feel like it makes, you know, we've been dealing so much, I think, lately between like the Marilyn Manson stuff and Amber Heard, Johnny Depp, and Angelina Jolie, now Amouranth. Every other week, it seems like there's a new story in the news about somebody who is unbelievably wealthy and famous being abused by a spouse, being harassed, something terrible happening to them. And this just goes to show, no matter who you are in life, no matter how successful you are, no matter how famous you are, no matter if you're literally streaming your life fucking 12 hours a day, and people think they know you, people don't really know what's going on. And we can't make assumptions about people's private lives based on what we see. Like, people, and I'm gonna bring this back again to Evan Rachel Wood and Marilyn Manson, because I just, my brain is making those connections, and I don't mean to be offensive if, this is offensive in some way. But a lot of people go, oh, well, like, Evan Rachel Wood, she was doing these movies, she was doing this press stuff, how could Marilyn Manson have possibly been abusing her if she was doing all of that? Meanwhile, Amouranth is streaming 12 fucking hours a day, and apparently the other 12, she's being abused by her fucking spouse. Not to mention, during those 12 hours she's streaming, she is being verbally abused by her fucking chat who hate her and are also horny for her. And she also has stalkers who stalked her at TwitchCon right before this happened. Like, it's a lot for any one person to deal with. But she was able to put up such a wall around all of this that none of us knew it was happening, even though tens of thousands of people were seeing her actual life, insofar as streaming is your actual life. Everyone was witnessing, as close as you could be, without being a family member or a close friend, her life, and no one knew this was going on. So don't make it sound like, oh, well, it wasn't obvious to us, and so they couldn't have really been abused. That is fucking bullshit. You have to mask that to some degree in order to survive. So I don't want to hear any fucking bullshit about how, well, if it was really happening, it would have been obvious, we would have known, if he was doing this, it would have been this, that, and the other. Like, what was shown on stream, I think, was really just a drop in the bucket of the totality of all of this. But if that's not enough for you to be like, this is at the bare minimum a very toxic relationship, I don't think there is anything that will be good enough to meet your standard. There's been a little bit of a debate about whether or not this counts as being like sex trafficking, and I don't really know about that. I feel like it's definitely indentured servitude, or maybe like forced sex work. I'm not sure exactly what the definition of like sex trafficking is, because she wasn't like, as far as I know, moved anywhere for the intention of like doing sex work against her will. But she definitely has participated in things that she does not seem to have fully consented to, that she didn't really want to do. The hot tub meta, I'm sure lots of her OnlyFans content, I'm sure other things interpersonally in her relationship, like the threesome stuff maybe even, was stuff she did not want to do. And she was using her body to make money for someone else. I would feel very comfortable saying he was her internet pimp. He was using her body for his benefit, not for hers. She did not want to do everything that was going on, clearly, and she just had to buckle down and survive that. And even as she got closer, and she said that she's wanted to save this money to have an animal sanctuary. And now that has, just as I said earlier, it kept being thrown away every single time he got angry. He kept moving the goalposts further and further and further. So not only could she never be good enough, but she would never have the money that she needed to leave and retire. It makes you wonder, like, how many other streamers, how many, on all levels, right? Both, people that are multimillionaires and people that are getting 50 viewers on average or making $100 on OnlyFans. How many people are doing that because they're being forced to do it by a partner under duress? They're being subject to coercive control. How common is that? And what do we do to make that less likely, to catch it earlier, so people aren't being forced into work they don't want to do? It's so exploitative. It's so awful. And yes, she made money, but as she said during the stream herself, like, she would rather be poor than have to go through this again, which I think just goes to show how awful it is. So I guess sort of the moral today is, again, you never really know what's going on behind the scenes. Don't judge people. Don't try to take away their autonomy. Listen to people when they are saying they're going through something. It's not an opportunity to spout off conspiracy theories. Realize that these things are complicated, and yes, terrible things that seem like something out of a, some kind of thriller horror movie that like would never happen in real life, like, controlling somebody's sleep depriving them, making them work 12 hours a day, doing all kinds of stuff. That does actually happen in relationships like this. It is not just an outlier. It's not just a one-off. People every day have to do this, and they don't have the benefit of having a huge audience of stream fans that can back them up and bear witness to what's happening to them. So, yeah, this is a hard video. I hope you all learned something. I don't know what exactly that would have been, but just listen to survivors. Don't be a piece of shit. This is not drama. This is not fun. This is a very real example of somebody suffering, and I hope it can be an example going forward for people that want to prevent this happening to themselves, to their loved ones, recognizing those patterns, providing something that can be furthered for educational purposes, maybe. I don't know. I try to, like, make these scenarios into something we can create something good out of. And maybe that's not always the best thing. Maybe I shouldn't try to think about it like that. Because sometimes things are just awful, and that's what they are. And that's all they can ever be. And it's one person suffering, and I don't want to trivialize that. You know, and it's also the wearing down, right? It's also she was saying they would have arguments that would go on for 24 hours at a time, or like 48 hours at a time. That's not normal. That's not healthy. That's not okay. That is not okay. And just kind of brushing it off as being like, well, everyone has fights sometimes. This is next level. That's not typical. And if it is normal for you, you need to rethink some things. You got to sit with yourself on that one, I think, if that's going on in your life. But yeah, it's horrible. It's awful. I think I got kind of everything off my chest. I wanted to say therapy, couples therapy does not work with abusers. Don't be mean to people. That's really, like, don't be mean to people that are coming out about their abuse. Have space for their fragility and their feelings and their emotionality and their decisions and their choices. That's really all I want. I think it's going to be it for today, guys. Stay safe. Again, resources down below, and I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.